Physical Education Training Board into session. Before we start the meeting, I need to establish a there you go. Ms. Leffler, would you at this point do a roll call, make sure we have everybody here?
Yes, if I could establish a quorum of board members. Prior to that, Craig, would you like to go ahead? Do we have Major Joanne Reed on the call from
Yes,
the
I'm here.
Pennsylvania State Police? Craig, would you like to go ahead and introduce her?
Yes, I would. Major Reed, this is Chairman Westover. Since you're our newest appointee from State Police on the board, would you give us an introduction and a brief bio of yourself, please?
Hi, yes, good morning. I've been a member of the Pennsylvania State Police for almost 20 years now. I just got promoted into this position at the beginning of April, so I've only been here a month, but prior to that, I was the director of the Operational Training Division within this Bureau for almost 3 years, so I do have a very good understanding of the Bureau, and I think it will be a transition for me. And I'm excited to be part of the board.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that intro and welcome aboard. And I hope you find this experience rewarding for you. Before I go any further, I just want to make sure if there's, let everybody know that the meeting is being recorded. Anybody objects at this time, any objections from a member of the public, they can be invited to either not speak or leave the meeting. And I want to make sure that everybody's, reminded that the meeting is being recorded. Okay. All right. At this point, then, roll call to establish that quorum. Ms. Leffler.
Yes, if I could have each board member state their name and they are present for the meeting, starting with Chair Westover.
Chairman Westover is present.
Tricia Norwood Foden's present.
Francis Pike, present.
And Major Reed, if you could just acknowledge again that you are present for the meeting.
Major Reed, present.
Thank you. We do have a majority of board members with 4 in attendance, so we can go ahead and conduct business as usual. I will go ahead and introduce the staff, the PCCD staff that are on the call. Myself, Sherry Leffler, I'm the supervisor for the Constable's Education and Training Program. Along with the staff for the program are Tracy Beaver and Nicholas Hartman. I also have with us this morning John Fowl, the manager of the Bureau of Training Services, Sally Berry, the office director for the Office of Justice Programs, which the Bureau of Training Services falls under. We have Dorothy Jacobelli. I hope I didn't butcher your name too bad. She is with our fiscal person within the Office of Financial Management at PCCD. We also have Megan Staub, who is our curriculum manager for the Bureau of Training Services. Have I not identified any other PCCD staff that are on the call that I failed to identify?
Good morning, Deborah Sandifer here.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm sorry, we have a long list of call-ins today.
Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa. Any other PCCD staff on the call? And also, along with the introduction that Chair Westover stated about that the meeting is being recorded, I also just want to remind everyone to please keep your mics muted unless you are speaking, and that all public voice questions will be taken at the end of the agenda then. Okay, we are good to go. And also, before I continue, if I could just ask any of the contractors that are on the call to identify themselves as well.
Good morning, everyone. Tony Luongo from Temple University, Director of Criminal Justice Training Programs.
Dee, I believe you are muted.
Tony Muha with Penn State.
Deidre Biter, Constable, Training Coordinator for Temple.
Good morning, Sherry. Steve Sheilo, also from Penn State.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that we may have missed, PCCD staff or contractors? Okay, I apologize, Chair. You could go ahead and proceed with the meeting.
Okay, we'll move into our first action item then. I appreciate everybody's introductions and appreciate everybody being on the call. Our first action item is going to be the unapproved minutes of the February 10th meeting of 2022, and I'll have Nick Hartman speak to that.
Hello, everyone. Program staff is asking the board for the approval of the unapproved draft minutes of the February 10th, 2022 meeting, which can be found on pages 2 through 9 in the packet. Program staff asks if there are any questions to the board or if there's any edits that need to be made.
Okay, is there any members that have any questions about the minutes as they've been presented? Hearing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Tricia
I'll
Norwood
make that
Foden.
motion.
Okay, I recognize Trish Norwood is making the motion. Do I have a second?
White, I'll second it.
Okay. Hearing no other discussion, roll call vote, please. A or nay as to the approval of the minutes. Chairman Westover approves aye.
Tricia Norwood Foden, aye.
White's aye.
Reed, aye.
Are there any
Okay, motion.
nays? Are there any nays to that vote? That would be a negative, and no abstentions.
Okay, very good. Motion passes then. And at this point, Sherry, do we need to ask for public comment on that particular item, or can we hold public voice to the end?
Well, we do need to ask for public comment on each action item prior to the vote being taken. But we could, if there's any, we could ask now at this point, if there's any public voice comment on this particular action item.
Yeah. So is there any public voice comments on the unapproved minutes that were just passed by the board? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to our next item, which is going to be the unapproved financial report for the May 5th, 2022 meeting. And I would recognize Dorothy, I believe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the fiscal report for the third quarter of fiscal year 2021-22 can be found on pages 10 to 15 of your packet, beginning with the statement of cash receipts, expenditures, and commitments on page 10. Under receipts, the balance carried forward from the prior fiscal year is $2,478,756.38. Fees collected through the end of the third quarter were $921,195.07. And total funds available as of the end of the third quarter, March 31st, 2022, were $3,399,951.45. Under expenditures and commitments, the total cumulative expenditures as of the end of the third quarter were $429,424.89. The total cumulative expenditures and commitments combined as of the end of the third quarter were $2,801,216.94, which includes $325,899.89 in administrative expenditures and commitments. The breakdown of those costs can be found on page 11. The total uncommitted funds as of March 31st, 2022, the end of the third quarter, is $169,309.62. Of note, on the administrative expenditures page, or the class fees paid by constables for training services as of the end of the third quarter, were $180,058. Are there any questions?
This is Chairman Westover. So I want to draw everybody's attention to page 14, and that's the constable fee collections. And as you can see on our fiscal year 21-22, if you look at page 14, clear to the right column, as you go down, we're looking at projected total at $921,195.07. And our original projection was 1.5, about $1,596,298. I would ask John Fowle if he would comment what his thought process is on where we're headed with these revenues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also too, at the last meeting, we had discussed getting some data from AOPC. Staff did request that on the surcharge, what's assessed, what's collected. And the last time I talked with them was about 14 April, because they wanted to make sure they got our requests correct as what we were looking for. So that'll take about 4 weeks. So we should actually be getting that data here soon. We can brief the board on the next meeting. But it's really trying to find out what the impact of the court closures and now that the courts are back open and the moratorium on evictions has been lifted, that's a large portion of, constables' work for the courts, a lot of landlord-tenant things. So I think in the next fiscal quarter, we might see the impact of that, how much work is now being caught up and is out there in the courts. And so I think we'll see a little uptick in revenues in the next report.
Okay, my concern is, John, it looks like we're getting pretty skinny again with all our cots and, charging for basic training and everything else we've done to try to keep the program financially solvent. I'm really concerned that we're getting back down to that point. And I'm going to throw this out to the entire board. I really want consideration from the board to allow me to draft a letter in conjunction with staff directly to the General Assembly, once again asking for funding help with a surcharge increase. And I'd like to have that letter brought back to the next quarterly meeting for the board's approval to send directly to the General Assembly from the training board. And I want to get comment from board members as to their thoughts on that particular recommendation. Trish, what's your thoughts? Trish, I kind of lean on you. You're court administrator. I mean, you think it's something we need to do?
Yes, I agree. I think we've discussed this before, just regarding the impact of not only the impact of the pandemic, but also the impact of us just losing constables that are actually working for the judiciary in general. So I think we're just going to have to take a different approach, a different strategy, and we're going to, need to, just take this different approach, because I don't think this is sustainable the way we're going right now. And it's not, it's not to say that, judicial districts aren't doing their job and they aren't out there to work. But I think, if you don't have constables working to do the collections, there's not much we can do out here in the judicial districts if we don't have the people to do the work that we can assess those education fees. So that is definitely an effort, or something that I can get behind as a board member, would be to go back to the legislature and say, look, we need to take another approach at this point, because I don't see much changing, at least in the near future. And if anything, because of the technology that is out there, especially, with the ability for defendants to e-pay their fines and costs, we don't have, as many warrants that are being issued. So, there right there is just a natural reduction on our funding stream. It's a good thing because people aren't getting warrants issued, but since we're counting on those CETA funds to be assessed against those warrants, if there's no warrants being issued, then there's no fees to be collected. And that's I think where we have to look at that trend, and that AOPC data is going to really be helpful.
Mr. Chair, if I could point out, the last time we got this data from AOPC several years ago, and we looked at a 5-year trend, there's also the lag time. So, the surcharge might be assessed today when that warrant or the civil papers are issued, but the collection, especially on the criminal stuff, might be 6, 8, 10 months later. And so even with a surcharge increase, even if it happened today, there's going to be a significant delay, I think, until the fund would actually feel that uptick or an increase in the surcharge. So that's the other thing to consider is that even if it passed today, it would take a little bit before the fund would see the impact.
Well, and I'm glad you pointed that out, John, because that's part of the pressure I'm feeling right now about, where we're headed financially. When I saw the financial projections coming in here, how it's been downgraded from 1.5 down to 900. That's real numbers for us. And I know even with, charging for basic training, we're not charging 100%. We're basically we're still funding part of that basic training for the new constables coming in. And here we are, we're still just running really thin on money. And I know the associations have tried, various legislators to, get something passed for surcharge increase. And so that's why, I broached the subject with the board about, writing a letter direct from the training board to the General Assembly to see if we can get any traction on this particular issue. So if I don't hear any opposition from board members here, then I'd like to proceed forward with that. I'd like to, draw on the staff to help me draft that letter. And then I'd like to bring that letter back to the next quarterly meeting for your approval, then to send off to the General Assembly. And so are there any other board members that have comment on, on this issue? Okay. Hearing none, then I'll move to have a motion to approve the unapproved financial report of the May 5th, 2022 meeting.
I'll make that motion. This is Fikes.
Thank you, Bud. Recognized Bud Fikes is making the motion to approve that. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Tricia Norwood Bowden.
Okay, thank you, Trish, for the second. Is there any further questions of board members, on this motion? How about staff? Anything with the staff?
I would also ask for public comment too, before we
Okay.
take the roll call vote.
Okay. Is there any public comment? If there is, I'd ask you to state your name and what county you're out of. If there's any comment about the unapproved financial minutes that we're considering at this point.
Scott Davis, Lower Paxton Township, Dauphin County.
Okay, so recognized. Thank you.
With the conversation just with training and the letter going to the legislators, just one of the challenges I have as a newly elected constable with a full-time job was finding time and availability to attend the 2-week training course. The financial aspect wasn't as big of a challenge outside of me moving into a new house and, having to have the money for that. But the fact of only 2 trainings, both of them being 2 weeks in, consecutive weeks, that posed some challenges as well and has limited my ability to get trained. And I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board of, looking at additional options for those constables that are new, that are looking to get trained, looking to get certified, and expanding the opportunities, or looking at ways that we can get training out of order or in other methodologies.
Yeah, and the point is well taken. And this is Chairman Westover, and I will say to you, one of the challenges that we have at this point coming out of the pandemic is locations of school buildings or firing ranges to run training. So part of the challenge has been getting a location booked in order to conduct training. And depending on whether you're in the East or whether you're in the West, Penn State does the weekend training option, where in the East they've been doing the 2 weeks in a row. And mainly the consideration is just getting the availability of building a range. So that's something that I understand where you're coming from on that. Sherry, would you have any additional comment on that issue?
Yeah, I was just going to say too, Chair, that the availability this year, like you said, a lot of it was based on the availability of facilities. And also, we really had no way to project how many new constables would be coming into the system this year. So and like Craig said, in the West, we had the basic training classes on the weekends. In the East, we had it during the week. Now, planning ahead for next year for 2023, we will have more opportunities in the eastern part of the region for those weekend classes. So that would be a Friday evening for 4 hours and then Saturdays and Sundays. And you would go for 20 hours for 4 weekends to get that 80 hours in rather than doing the two 40-hour weeks Monday through Friday. So we will have more opportunities available for the weekend classes in 2023.
If I
Okay,
can
thank
ask,
you much.
because of, if I can just ask, are there additional trainings available this year that are weekend classes?
There are not. We had 4 basic training classes, 80-hour basic training classes scheduled, and all 4 of those are full.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else on public voice?
Hi, this is Herbert Brown, Bradford County.
Okay, so recognized.
Okay, well, I live in very rural northeast Pennsylvania, and I'm a newly elected constable. And I got to go to Luzerne County.
No.
I mean, well, a lot of this call in Lancaster, excuse me, and to get certified and everything. And a lot of this cost is, if I was a person just being elected and I would see the cost and what all goes into this, I would drop it right there just because of that. A lot of it is cost prohibitive for some people, and a lot of the warrants are in your rural part of the state. So it does make it kind of tough for some of us.
I understand your thought process. This is Chairman Westover, and I will tell you that one of our saving graces as constables are independent contractors, so we have the ability to deduct a lot of these costs. And I understand getting in if money's thin, it is a challenge. However, there is an ability, for lodging and for mileage and things of that nature, that as an independent contractor, getting your business set up as a constable, because truly you're a self-employed business person. You have the availability that a lot of people don't of, making those deductions. But I understand where you're coming from. We try to center up the training locations closest to the majority of the population that's going to be attending the class. But as we spoke about, with the previous call-in person, was that, with pandemic, it has been tough getting locations, maybe not where we, would have liked to have had them, but we've had to take basically what we could find available. And hopefully going forward from this year, that things will get better.
Okay. The next thing I want to mention is a lot of your warrants are in the rural areas, and that should help with the funding once the magistrates and judges pick up pace. But the problem is a lot of them don't want to enforce these little I don't know how to say this, minor offenses or whatever.
Well, I can tell you, as a working constable out there for the past 27 years, one of the issues we've had also the pandemic has been jail populations. So a lot of the counties have put a lot of pressure on their, district judges not to incarcerate people on, minor offenses, or minor, fines and cost warrants, just because of not only the pandemic, but also with just having the room, in the jails in order to put them in. So, that's another consideration. I also work here in the Northwest in a rural area, and I understand you're saying there are a lot of warrants out here in the rural parts of Pennsylvania, which is a lot of us. But the fact of the matter is, we just have to roll the punches as they're thrown at us right now coming out of this pandemic.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
And if I could just
Yep, you're
add,
welcome.
Constable Brown, we are considering a basic training in the Northeast. Now, I'm not sure in relation to where you would be located, but we are considering having both in the Northeast and the Northwest. Next year, having a basic training in both of those areas. And again, as you stated, all those costs are on the constable, their constable's responsibility to incur those costs. But the costs, I just wanted to take a moment to brief you on the reasoning behind the cost involved with the 80-hour basic and the 40-hour basic firearms. When we went through the last election cycle in 2016, we had trained 506 newly elected constables and deputy constables. Out of those, we only had about 70%, so about 353 who actually got certified. Of those 353 individuals that got certified, none of them did any work for the courts. So therefore, they were not putting in the surcharge fees into the training fund. And that was a decision that the board had made beginning January 1st of 2020, that if you are going to be vested in taking on this position in this job as a constable performing work for the judiciary, that you would have to pay those costs up front in order to become certified. So I just wanted to put that out there too, a little background information.
Okay, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Make those newly elected constables work for the judiciary for a year or two.
That's something that staff are working on, having that data transfer between the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts and our system, so that we could, because there may come a time as well where other costs might be involved. But that is a good suggestion, and we are currently looking into something into that effect.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have anybody else for public voice?
Constable Abraham
Okay,
Smith, Westmoreland County.
Okay. Duly recognized. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman and the board. This is Abraham Smith, Constable Westmoreland County. I just want to point out one of the problems that I think is actually kind of burning the candle at both ends, making it difficult for your board in terms of the finances, but also difficult for the constables to try to actually earn some money and make this viable, is a practice that a lot of the common police courts have undertaken, as ours did in 2011, of precluding the minor judiciary from giving their even summary warrants to the constables. I talked to our sheriff yesterday in Westmoreland County. Back in 2011, they had 8,000 outstanding warrants. As of yesterday, he has 32,000. The courts of common pleas have, for some reason, in a growing number of counties, prohibited the minor judiciary from giving their warrants to the certified constables. I realize there's nothing, of course, the board can directly do over the judiciary, but I know we have somebody from court admins on here, and if they could take note of this and try to get the word out that, we're certified and we really need to get this work, and the board needs to get these funds from our fees. This is, I think, a big component in the problem, excuse me, when we say the fees haven't been coming in. I thought Westmoreland was the only one, but apparently there's a number of them. And that's my comment. Thanks, Fred.
All right, Abraham, you're duly noted on that, and I appreciate your comments. And well, we're trying to keep communication up with AOPC, and also as we get the opportunity talking with common police judges in order to facilitate this. So hopefully we'll make progress on that issue. So I appreciate your comment. Do we have anybody else for public voice?
Constable Michael Ludwig, Montgomery County.
Constable Ludwig, you're recognized.
I just wanted to follow up. I've been requesting some information from the program since December. There's a possibility the Veterans Administration can pay for some or all of the costs due to the training, whether it's the basic training or the firearms training. But the program is, I'm being told from the Veterans Administration, has to do some effort on there, and I just haven't heard back anything. I've tried a couple times to talk to Nick and leave him some messages. So if there was anybody that could give me a follow-up on that, or if that's something follows along the lines with constables having to pay, it'd be great if the Veterans Administration would be able to cover some of those costs. So I appreciate your time.
Mr. Chair, I can address that. This is John Fow. We've actually had 2 meetings now, staff, because on the deputy sheriff side, we oversee the deputy sheriff training program. That's a VA approved job training program. So we've met with the Department of Veterans and Military Affairs in Pennsylvania, because they are the approving authority for the VA on these things. So we have to meet with them initially. We had to provide all kinds of documentation about the training, the hours, the curriculum, where it's offered around the state, et cetera. Their initial feedback was positive that it will probably meet the VA's requirements because they have a minimum number of hours and those kinds of things. So now we have a checklist from them of other information, more detailed information we have to provide. So once staff has been working on that, and we get that back to the Department of Veterans and Military Affairs. So when we went through this with the Deputy Sheriff program, it's not a quick process to get it approved. So we are working on that.
Okay, I appreciate your comment, Director Fowl. At this point, public voice, if it doesn't have anything to do with this unapproved financial report, I would ask that we'll have public voice at the end. So any other issues that are out there, we can talk about it at that point. But is there anyone else in public voice with the specific motion that's on the floor, the unapproved financial report of the May 5th, 2022 meeting? Okay, hearing none, I had a motion, I had a second. Sherry, would you do a roll call vote?
You are muted, Sherry.
Sorry, Chair Westover,
A.
Patricia Norwood Foden,
Yes.
Major Joanne Reed,
Yes.
Constable Bud Pites.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any noes or any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion passes. All right, we're going to move on to our third action item then, which is instructor certifications. I would recognize Tracy Beaver from staff, if you would take it from here.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Tracy, PCCD staff for the Constables Training Program. The instructors that are brought forth today are for Penn State University, the Jazzy section. The first one is Dominic Simona. He is requesting certification in firearms, and he does meet the requirements, and staff recommend that Dominic Simona be approved for the firearms certification. The second one is Merle Giese, again with Penn State University. He is requesting topic certifications for general, physical skills, and firearms. And he does meet the requirements, and staff does recommend his certification for those three topics. The third Penn State instructor is Marcus Cohan. He is already currently a board certified instructor. He is requesting additional certifications for the topics of law, as well as communications and MOAB. He just received his certification for that. So staff recommends board certification for Marcus Cohan for law and communications. The next instructor is Timothy Neese. He is requesting topic certifications for general, physical skills, and firearms. And he also meets the required credentials to be approved. And staff does recommend board certification for Timothy Neese for those three subjects. The last instructor for Penn State University Jazzy is Sean O'Block. He is requesting certification in the general topic. He does meet the required certifications to be approved for the general topic, and staff do recommend that Sean O'Block be approved for the general topic.
Okay,
And
thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's everyone, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so you've heard consideration, board members, of those that staff has approved, or is recommending to be approved. So do I have a motion to approve the instructors that was just presented by staff member Beaver?
I'll make that motion. This is Spike.
Okay, Bud Pites, you'll be recognized as making the motion. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second Tricia Norwood Foden.
Okay, Tricia Norwood, Soden, you'll be the second. Is there any discussion amongst the board members or any other PCC the staff for this action item? Okay, hearing none, then I'll ask if there's any public comment on any of the instructors that have presented. And as a reminder for public voice, it's just on this particular subject. So is there any public voice discussion on any of the people that have been presented for approval of instructor certification? Hearing none, then Ms. Leffler, would you do a roll call vote?
Yes, Chair Westover,
I approve. Yes.
Constable Pites,
Aye.
Tricia Norwood Foden,
Aye.
Major Reed.
Aye.
Thank you. All in favor.
Okay, very good. Motion passes. These instructors have been approved, and I'll welcome them aboard. All right. At this point, we'll move on to our fourth action item, which is a request for exception to board regulations for an ineligible waiver applicant. Sherry Leffler, would you like to speak to this subject?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. We had received a law enforcement basic training waiver application from the individual mentioned, Richard Begenwald. And in the application, we are very, very specific that they have to have been employed within the past 2 years. So when the application was received by my office on January 7th of 2022, I, per board regulation, advised him that he was ineligible to take the waiver examination because of the 2-year lapse. His last date of employment was April 1st of 2019. And so his eligibility period would have ended on April 1st of 2021, which would have been the 2-year window. We did not, again, receive the application until January 7th of 2022. So I had denied this based upon board regulation. And then Constable Begenwald had filed a training grievance asking the board to reconsider this decision. And as per the training grievance policy that the board approved in I believe it was 2019, any grievances requesting board action will be presented to the board as an action item at the next scheduled board meeting. So therefore, I am requesting and recommending that the board deny this request for an exception based upon the current board regulations regarding the eligibility for the law enforcement waiver. Are there any questions from the board?
Chair Westover, the regulations look pretty clear to me. I look at the paperwork that you presented, and I don't see any reason why to waiver from staff's recommendation on this, because I don't see anything here that would lead me to believe anything different.
Hey, I have just one quick question. You said, this was before my time on the board, you said that the change for the 2-year lapse was decided. What year did you say that, Sherry? That you said that was something different prior to that?
No, I'm not sure there was no change to the waiver, the eligibility for the waiver.
I mean, the years of not being employed. Has that always been 2 years?
That has always been 2 years in the regulations, correct?
Okay, thank you
Correct.
for the clarification.
Yep.
Yeah, I believe what your reference to, Trish, is the on the waiver itself, information that he was employed up until 2019. Do I have a motion to approve staff's recommendation on this subject?
I make that recommendation. It's pretty cut and dry. How this is laid out. So he's just trying to sidestep the waiver.
Okay. All right, Bud, I'll take that as a motion then. Do I have a second to Constable Pites' motion?
I'll second that. Tricia Norwood Foden.
Okay, Trish Norwood Soden will be recognized as a second. Any further discussion by board or staff? Do I have any public comment on this particular issue? Hearing none, then I'll have Ms. Leffler do a roll call vote.
Chair Westover,
Aye.
Constable Pites,
Aye.
Tricia Norwood Foden,
Aye.
and Major Reed.
Aye.
All in favor.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate getting that handled. We will move on then to the next, which is discussion items. And I'll move to the supervisor's report. Recognize Sherry Leffler to give us that report.
Hi, good morning again, everyone. You have this information. I will just go briefly through it so that it is, in the minutes then. So the status of the 2022 trainings, this is as of April 25th, all of these stats. We had scheduled 39 in-person classes, 18 have been completed. We've canceled 3 so far. We've had 431 successfully complete the in-person 8-hour training. The online training, crisis intervention, we're at 220 have completed, or 27%. We have had some first attempts at all 3 of the online subjects. Legal updates, we're at 24% and also 24% for service of criminal warrants. So any constables that are on this call, I would just continue to encourage you to get those online training subjects completed as soon as possible, so that we don't have a rush at the end of the year again, because everything needs to be completed by 5 p.m. on November 18th of 2022 to meet the training requirements for the year 2022. We have, however, had 127 constables and deputy constables who have already completed all of the 2022 Con Ed requirements. The annual firearms qualification classes, we've had 40 scheduled, 10 have been completed, and we've canceled 4 annual firearms classes so far. 177 have attempted the qualification, 170 have successfully completed the qualification course of fire, and we've had 7 failures, which is about 4%. Basic trainings. I did state earlier, we have 4 basic training classes. Originally, we scheduled 3, added on a 4th in October at Lancaster County Public Safety Center. All of those classes are full. We have had 130 who have paid and been enrolled into those 4 80-hour basic training classes. We still, however, have a considerable number of individuals who were not able to get into training classes this year. So staff are working on reaching out to them. We had about 45 or so that we were waiting on a copy of their election certificate or appointment orders. We have reached out to them, given them a deadline of May 27th to provide this documentation. If the documentation is not provided, we will reject those registrations and sets. Currently in sets, we have about 140 that have provided the information, and they are just basically waiting on a spot to open up in an 80-hour basic training class. So staff have been working on pulling some statistics together so that we can come up with a game plan for next year. And as soon as we have, the facilities confirmed and dates confirmed, we will start reaching out to these individuals. But I would encourage any, newly elected or appointed constables or deputy constables to please register in the SET system as soon as possible so that we can track you, to make sure that we do get the information out to you about the 2023 classes. We did have we have a basic training going on right now at Westmoreland County Community College. They skip this weekend, and then they start back up on May 13th. And then we'll have 2 20-hour weekends to finish that up. We do have a basic firearms class that will be starting actually next weekend on May 13th at Lancaster County Public Safety Center. That class is also full, but we do still have 3 other basic firearms classes scheduled for this year. And again, as far as basic firearms, we will try to schedule as many as we can earlier in the year 2023 to get any individuals caught up with their firearm certifications that may not have been able to attend this year, that had attended the basic training classes. We have had 5 approved law enforcement waiver applicants come through. 2 have passed the waiver examination, and we have 3 that Tracy is currently working on scheduling them to come in to the office to take the test. We're still continuing to send out ID cards as needed every Tuesday when staff are in the office. And just an update on the certified stats. Currently, we have, well, as of April 25th, we have 732 active and certified constables. We're down about 150 constables from April of 2021. In April of 2021, we had 883. As of April 25th, we had 732. Firearms certified, right now we have 560, which is about 77% of that active and certified number. However, in April of 2021, we had 727 firearms certified constables and deputy constables. The total number of certifications that have been granted through basic training or the waiver application since 1996 is 4,682 certifications. Are there any questions on my supervisor's report?
Sherry, no, go ahead.
Well, Trish, I recognize you. Go ahead, Trish.
Okay, thank you. It's just more, not necessarily a question, but a comment. Should I assume that any of the newly elected or appointed constables that are not able to get into the basic training this year will have priority in getting seats next year when those come around?
That is correct. So
Okay.
that's why I had said there's about 140 that are currently in sets that have provided that paperwork. So we will reach out to those individuals that have provided their paperwork, but have not attended a basic training.
Right.
So we will reach out to them first and yes, give them the first opportunities to those spots.
All right, thank you. And only the reason why is, I'm just speaking about what's going on in my own county of Chester County. Prior to the pandemic, we had 41 active constables working hard and getting a lot of our court business done. As of yesterday, we're down to 12. We're a county that has 16 MDJ offices, and I was at our Criminal Justice Advisory Board meeting yesterday, and one of the DJs was explaining for the 3 judges that had criminal day yesterday, they have 3 judges that actually have to work among each other and who gets constables for their criminal day. So one gets the constables for the training or for the transports. I think we had one judge with 4 different defendants in 4 different jails. So that took out 8 of the 12 constables, which left 3 for the remaining courts. And so the judges are now working among themselves, kind of volunteering to give up their defendants for that criminal hearing, and then just continuing it to the next week, taking turns who gets the constable. So the crisis is real, and I'm sure it's not just my own county. Anything that we can do to get these basic certification courts is, working at full capacity with constables that are willing to perform services for the courts. It's critical. I mean, speaking from as a court administrator, our MDJ offices are suffering terribly because of the lack of constables right now that are able to work. So, thank you.
Tricia, if I could just add to that, looking in the system right now, I am showing that we have 31 active and certified constables in Chester County.
Yeah.
So right there, that's telling us that some of those 31 are not performing work for the courts.
That is correct. Right. So that's, I know, another issue that we as a board, need to address and have discussed several times about constables taking certification training and not performing court services. So again, I don't know what the solution is, but there's a lot of smart people on this board and in this system that we have to come up with something, because this is just not sustainable from an MDJ's perspective, and it's not fair to the citizens that can't get their hearings done.
Thank you.
That point's recognized. Yeah, and Trish, I understand what you're saying because I'm in the same situation. I'm actually commuting to another county right now, helping out of court because of their shortage, and that's the inequity of the system. In some areas of the state, we have more constables than there is work available. In other areas, there's more work than there's constables available, and that's kind of the inequity of this entire system right now. So I appreciate your point of view on that from Chester County. Any other board member that wants to speak to this issue?
Well, it'll tell me the error when
Okay, hearing none, then Ms. Leffler, would you go to the second discussion item, the board regulations revision discussion? Both you and Director Fowl.
Yeah, we'll probably tag team on this a little bit here.
Okay.
So provided to the board, in addition to this discussion item that was included in the board packet, I did provide a Word document of the board regulation changes that staff are recommending. In those, and we talked a little bit about this at the February meeting. And Nick, if you could maybe stop sharing your screen and I'll share my screen then, and I can pull the regulations up then. But basically anything that is underlined is a proposed addition to the current regulations, and any text that is stricken out is what we would like to have deleted from the regulations. Have the board members had an opportunity to go through our recommended changes to the regulations?
Well, Chairman Westover has. I've gone through it. How about other members of the board?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So basically what I will do then, rather than, going through each individual change in the regulations, if there are any questions that you may have starting out with the regulation changes, and then we'll get into some of the discussion items that we have, that staff have, that we would like to discuss with the board. Okay, hearing none. So basically, I would like to start out on the discussion items. And John, feel free to, provide input as well as we're going through this.
Hey,
So
Sharon.
yep, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing I would like to say is that, this is a first look. So we're not going to be asking the board to vote on this today. This is because we want to make sure we get any regulatory changes as best, get it right the first time. But we want to make sure we go through this in a deliberate manner. So this is just a draft, and this is just up for discussion right now. I'm sure we'll be bringing this back easily at one meeting, maybe even another meeting after that, to fine tune any of the verbiage. So just keep that in mind. We don't have to solve everything today.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point too, John. Again, it may take us 3-4 meetings to get through all of the changes and all the discussion items. But the first discussion item we would like to bring to your attention is not actually listed on the discussion items write-up that was given to the board members. So as staff were actually going through and reviewing the regulations, we came across another inconsistency, which we thought we had them all identified in the regulation. So I'm sharing my screen here, and I'm gonna pull these sections up to show what I'm referring to. Okay, so under the basic training section of the regulations, where we spell out the subjects, the courses of instruction, what are our requirements, then we get into the failures. So currently under the basic training, we have it stated within the regulations that if a failure occurs because we're still giving 2 opportunities at the written examination. But if a failure occurs after the second written examination, that individual would have to attend and complete a second basic training course in its entirety. Of course, the constable would again have to pay for the financial responsibility to attend that additional course as well. So when the regulations were, touched last time in 2009, we did not have them paying for the basic trainings or the basic firearms. So when we go then and we look at the continuing education requirements, we are allowing an individual who goes to a Con Ed, if they fail the second attempt at that written examination, they are able to complete that failed subject and do not have to go back and complete the continuing education course in its entirety, as we do within the basic training. So one of the recommendations I would like to make today to the board is to have this be consistent. So if an individual fails a subject at a basic training course, they would be permitted to come back and just retake that subject.
Good.
Does that make sense to the board members?
And I would like to point out, this is kind of also would be more consistent with the deputy sheriff program.
Mhm.
So in their basic training, if a deputy fails civil law, retakes the test and fails again, he can continue in the academy, and he would have to come back and retake that civil law module and retest. Of course, the only difference is when a guy does double fail, we notify the county. So maybe sometimes the sheriff might have him come back from the academy, or a lot of times if it's an academic subject, they'll let him continue, and then he'll have to come back at another basic and complete that failed subject. So.
Well, this is Chairman Westman. I think it's all about fairness, and really, I don't believe it's fair to make somebody go back through for the entire basic training now that they're paying. You know, back when it was free, I might have had a different attitude, but at this point, I don't think it's fair. And I think that if they come back if it's a 4-hour block of training that they failed, and they have to come back to a following basic training course and just sit in on that 4 hours, I think if we charge an hourly rate, whatever that would equate out to, and I think roughly we're looking at $50, maybe $60 for that.
Yeah, like $56, something like that. Yep.
Okay. So they
retake a 4-hour subject.
Yeah, retake it at a following, basic training, and pay the $50-some and pass the test, and then they're good to go. So I don't have a problem with the concept at all, and I'd like to try to keep it in line with some of the other training programs like the Sheriff's Academy. So I don't have an issue in the world with doing that. So what's the other board members' thoughts on that?
And I think, just to chime in, I think it's also important to recognize that you're not then taking a seat in other classes that the constable had already passed, and then, not then permitting somebody who needs the class the first time to be able to get into that class. So I think it absolutely makes sense, and I think it's beneficial to the program in general to do it that way.
Yep, and that's a great point. Thank you for raising that, Tricia.
Okay.
And the other thing that I wanted to go ahead.
Yeah.
They don't.
Constable Pice, any comment on that?
I agree with both of you. Very good.
Okay.
How about Major Reed?
Fine point.
Okay, very good. Major Reed, any thought on that?
I like.
Okay.
The only other change that I would recommend here as well, to be consistent with the continuing education, would be getting rid of this subsection D, where we allow them to come back, to a third basic training course if they failed that second basic training course. Right now, under the continuing education requirements, we only give them 2 opportunities. They do not get a third opportunity. So there again, like I said, I'd like to get rid of that paragraph so that we're consistent with the continuing education. So we're only ever giving 2 chances to successfully complete either the basic training course or the continuing education course, and then we're consistent between the training types then.
That sounds reasonable, Sherry.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I'd also like to point out to the board is that also too, when those regulations were updated, we did have early in the program, there were consistent failures in basic training, and we really haven't had that over the last, I would say 7, 8, 10 years.
Correct.
It's rare that somebody actually fails out of a basic. So.
Okay,
Very
thank
good.
you for that. I wanted to bring that to your attention. Now back to the actual discussion item. So one of the things that staff also wanted to discuss with the board is this section here and this is under both under the basic training, that they must demonstrate proficiency in each examination of practical skills, such as defensive tactics and mechanics of arrest. The thing that the board and staff have struggled with over the years, and we have allowed those waivers of participation, and honestly, they have increased. With my experience, 14 years with the board, when I first started, there was probably sometimes 50% of a class would waive out of participation. Now we get very few, unless there is a medical reason or something like that. Then we do still offer that ability. But one of the questions that staff have to the board is, how does the board enforce this section of the reg for mandatory participation? Are there any suggestions?
One of the things I would like to provide in way of background is that, for when you look at other academies, Act 120, deputy sheriffs, all those individuals are an employee of some kind of entity, whether it's a department, a county. In the Deputy Sheriff Academy, we require a physical, and the sheriff and the doctor and the training officer have to sign off saying, this deputy is physically able to perform these things in training. And with constables being independent contractors, and there's no one above them to validate, hey, they're physically able or whatever. And early on, constables, their concern was they didn't want to get hurt in training, because then they can't go to work on Monday, to earn a living. So it's been a topic over the years to try and how do we do this in a fair and equitable manner, to say you have to demonstrate physical skills in order to pass the training.
Well, John, I think the only thing we can do is to get, as an active DT instructor, when I've run into that issue, I guess when I reiterate to them that, look, your records are permanent. They're permanent training records. If you get called on it, in some force claim, use of force, excessive or whatever, they're going to look directly at your training records to see, did you participate? And I think it's important that you do participate, because it's in the record, and it's eligible for subpoena. And so you get into court. Do you want to be on the side of, yeah, I participated and it's marked off on a training record that you did, or I waived out, and now you have to explain that to the court. So most of the time when I explain it in that fashion, we've gotten good participation rates. But the other issue what you talked about is getting hurt, by the constables. But I've also have constables that also work as police officers, and who've said, well, if I get hurt on, my work comp won't cover me, for training, as a constable, and I can't go to work as a police officer. So that's the other issue that's been out there. But to be honest with you, I think we just have to continue to reiterate, hey, it's in your permanent training record, and it does follow you, if you have an issue down the road. I mean, I don't know what else at this point, that we can do.
Right. And I will point out to the board, we do document, Sherry mentioned medical, and, our training population is probably on average, I think the last time we looked, it was, 56, 57, compared to, say, deputy sheriff or, municipal police. They probably have a much lower average age coming into an academy. So we do have guys who have maybe a medical issue, and we do have the ability that when they might participate in 4 out of the 5 skills being taught that day, but the 5th skill, because they just had back surgery or a knee surgery, that they're on the side of caution. So we even document the guys that do everything they physically can, and maybe they do have to opt out of one of the physical skills. So, and you're right, Craig, this does come up. We've had constables who have ended up in court because of some issue, and they do subpoena the training records. I can think of one example, and one constable participated in everything. He was OC and baton certified, everything. The other constable never participated, never took OC baton, and that kind of came out, I know, in the civil case.
So it will
Point well
follow them,
taken.
just as you said, Chair. It will follow them.
Yeah, I wish I had more to offer at this point, but I don't. Any other board members want to weigh in on this discussion?
I agree with you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Constable Pites. All right then, Sherry, you want to continue on with this, the draft part then?
Sure. The second discussion item we wanted you to consider is also under continuing education. We do have, and I have already taken this out as a possible deletion, but we also wanted to discuss it with you as well. So section 43133 here, eligibility for waiver. That is wherein if a constable is currently employed as a municipal police officer or deputy sheriff, there may be topics or subjects that are waived that they are being taught in their, MOPAC training or the deputy sheriff's training. And we would allow them to waive out of that subject material for that year. The last time that this happened was the terrorism awareness program back in 2009. And we have not had any since that time. So staff are basically we're recommending that we remove the continuing education subject waiver from the regulation changes so that they would be deleted. So we would no longer have a continuing education subject waiver.
And the one comment I would add is the number of waivers we get a year are very small, and the number of constables who are also current police officers or deputy sheriff is a very small number. So
yep.
Yeah, it's not impacting a large portion of the population. And, even on things like legal updates, the legal updates you're getting as a police officer are going to be different than the legal updates you're getting as a constable, just because of your different role, the different hat you're going to wear on the street.
And there again, it's sort of like a cleanup, housekeeping, to get to take this out because it hasn't been used in so long.
Well, as I've looked through the draft, it looks pretty thoughtful, and it is. Any item that, that we're looking at to change is just issues that we've run across at our typical board meetings over the last number of years. And, it's like everything else. These documents need to be updated, from time to time. And I really don't, there's nothing that stands out at me as being out of line. It's pretty much just cleaning up. A lot of it was just language stuff that, either was kind of incomplete, or was not descriptive enough. So, I like how you've gone through, so far and presented this. So I have no issues what I'm seeing so far.
Okay, excellent.
The one thing I would also add, Mr. Chair, this is also observations from staff, how as the training population has changed and the program has evolved, we need to, because I can speak to the intent of the regulations in 2009 or even back when it was first passed, I think in 2005, things were very different then. As you know, you were on the board early on. So we have seen a change. So we need to make sure the regs reflect those.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Any other board members have a comment at this point, or are we ready to move on?
Okay, if we are ready to move on, then the last discussion item that staff would like to bring to the board's attention, we did provide in this discussion item some background information on the law enforcement waiver of the 80-hour basic training course. So we have provided there our facts, restraints, assumptions. Would the board like me to review these at this time, or can we get right into the courses of action? Okay, hearing none. Staff have presented the current process for the law enforcement waivers where the application has to be submitted along with the supporting documentation. It is reviewed by staff. If it meets the criteria, we notify that constable and then schedule them to come in and take the waiver examination. The waiver examination currently is 100 questions. It is covering all of the subjects except for the less than lethal option certifications in the 80-hour basic training course. If they pass the waiver, then we would notify them. They'd have to get their liability insurance, and then we would be able to certify them to perform work for the judiciary. John, do you want to pipe in and go over the courses of action, or do you want me to just keep going?
Sure. No, I'll go ahead. If you can bring those up, Sherry, on your screen there. And so also too, as a point of background, first of all, in the act, there is no requirement for the board to provide a law enforcement waiver. There is that requirement in the Deputy Sheriff Act, but the board did provide it, excuse me, from the beginning, because when the act was passed, there was a section that said if you were a constable or deputy at the time of the act being passed, you had the ability to take a waiver test, a one-time chance to take the waiver test. If you failed, you had to go to basic, or you could just opt not to take the waiver and go to basic. We had about 700, just under 750 constables take the waiver exam. Approximately 600 passed. Those who failed went to basic or resigned or whatever. So I just want to establish that there was no statutory requirement, but the board felt that because constables had that opportunity at the beginning, they wanted to provide that as well. Plus, it makes sense. So we provided that law enforcement waiver, and the board kind of applied the same methodology. If you met certain criteria, you were within 2 years of your employment as a municipal police officer, deputy sheriff, trooper, you would submit your documentation. If you met that, then we would coordinate for you to come take the waiver exam. And if you pass, you got your, once you got insurance, you were then certified. If you failed, you had the opportunity to go to basic training. So I kind of wanted to put that as a background. So the first course of action, obviously, is to eliminate the waiver altogether. We average maybe less than a dozen waiver applications a year, if that. In the life of the program, since we've offered it in 96 waivers, we've only had about 159 waivers total in 27 years. That means guys who at least applied or were eligible. But I think we have a 25-year history of offering that waiver. I don't think that would be a good course of action. We have precedent there. And, you're recognizing their previous years of experience and training. So, and ultimately the goal of the training program is to professionalize constables and make sure they're well trained, and bringing somebody in who has years of other experience and training into the training population is not a bad thing. The second option is eliminating the waiver test. And if they meet the board's criteria of, their employment and certification within 2 years, that the staff would review it. If they meet those requirements, then we could approve it. And then they would just attend a relevant portion of the basic training. So, right off the bat, that's going to be civil law, municipal police officers, troopers, they do not get civil. The deputy sheriffs do get civil, but the amount of the MDJ level civil they get is small. That training is focused on the Court of Common Pleas. And then, the role of the constable, which kind of gives the history and the introduction and where the constable fits in the current, judicial system. And then I would say prisoner transport. This is on par. Deputy sheriffs, if you're a previous municipal police officer, trooper, this is what they do. They don't have a waiver test. They eliminated it back in, I want to say, about 2005, 2006, because so many guys would fail the waiver. And so the sheriff's appeal was because they don't get the civil training, et cetera. So they now, if you meet the criteria, you go to a 2-week waiver course, and it focuses on civil law, court security, the prisoner transport, the kind of stuff that maybe a municipal police officer doesn't get extensive training on. As you know, prisoner transports for a constable or deputy sheriff tend to be longer. You might be going to pick the guy up in one county and bringing him here. So there's a lot more involved. And of course, they would keep it in line with everyone else, they would have to pay for that portion of the basic training they attend. And all of this is just preliminary suggestions. You know, we can work around these courses of action as you feel necessary. And then the third one, of course, is to maintain the status quo, where they would have to take the waiver exam and pass it or not. So with that, I would open it up to any discussion.
Well, John, I would say at this point, I'm interested in looking at, you know, all three options, you know, just having them detailed out by staff and then, you know, presenting it at further, you know, at a future meeting and, you know, making a decision from there.
Okay, and what I would suggest, we have presented this to the board in the past. We do have recent statistics on how many guys have applied, how many were approved, how many took the waiver, and how many of those who failed who went on to take the basic. And the numbers dropped dramatically. A lot of the guys, if they failed it, we never hear from them again. So you'll be surprised when you see those numbers. And that may help the board a little bit in their decision on which way to go. So we can bring that back at the next meeting.
Okay. Any other board members, any comment on this?
Could somebody just remind me real quick, what's the passing grade for the waiver exam?
It's 70. And that's the other thing too, when we went back and we dug through all the law enforcement waivers, we did look at test scores. And just from experience, because the test is proportionate to the hours in basic training, and civil law is the biggest single block. So in the waiver test, that has the most questions. And when you score those waiver tests, you'll see that's where the weakest part is, because as I said, municipal police, they don't get a lot of training in civil law, you know, especially at the MDJ level. So the scores tend to be, you know, mid 70s is kind of the average score.
Yeah, and so I would definitely parallel what the chairman has said. I think this definitely warrants a deeper conversation so that we can look at each of those recommendations. And what you just said, John, I think is pretty important to look at those test scores and the effect that, you know, really the effectiveness of waiving out of that when they are missing a big chunk of, you know, work that's being done in the district courts. So I agree. This definitely warrants further discussion among the board.
Okay.
Yeah, and as Sean said, we could definitely pull more information together to present at the August meeting then. And again, I also wanted to point out, you know, the board may, you know, once we have this further discussion in August, they may come back and say, well, let's take some elements from, you know, this course of action and this course of action and create our own course of action. So that's an option too, as well, for the board.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All
So
right.
we will bring this, staff will bring this back as a discussion item for the August meeting then. In the interim, I will make some of the changes that were discussed today and bring those back then in August then as well, as far as, you know, what we discussed earlier about the basic training and the Con Ed being consistent. So we'll bring those back as well.
Okay. Very good. All right. Are we ready then to move on to other business?
I
Ms.
believe
Leffler?
so.
Okay.
Sure. I will go ahead. The next item on the agenda is an informational item. On a yearly basis, I do try to update the board on both training grievances that are filed and also waiver applications. So on an annual basis, you will get those updates from staff. This is very self-explanatory. We had actually there was two training grievances that were filed regarding denials of a waiver application. They did not provide any new information or any. Is there some? I feel like there's someone who is like in their vehicle driving maybe or something. I keep hearing beeping. Could you mute your mic, please? Okay, there it went. Thank you. No, there it's back. But yeah, if anybody who is not speaking at the moment could mute your mic so we don't get that background interference, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So with the training grievances, as I was stating, they were denials grievances based upon denials of the waiver application. No new information was provided to change the circumstances of the denial, so the grievance was closed. The third grievance that was filed in August of last year was in relation to a lapse in certification, both for the firearm certification and then also continuing education. This individual had numerous no-shows on their training transcript and didn't provide information to the board in a timely manner. You know, that they weren't basically they were a no-show 4 times as defined in the board regulation, 4 times since 2016. So basically they filed a grievance then based upon these no-shows stating that, you know, they were in the hospital and all these other things, you know, and I had communication but with them both phone, email, and also in writing, explaining what they needed to do to maintain their certification, and they just ignored the communication that I had sent out. But then when it came time to pay for the no-shows, then they had filed the training grievance then. So,
And Sherry,
and you can see my responses there. Yep, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, and the board regulation does allow for extenuating circumstances, but staff typically asks that they provide some kind of documentation. And that was the issue, that the documentation wasn't provided, so.
Yeah. And then the story kept changing, basically. Okay, I have nothing further. Any questions, comments on that informational item? Okay, hearing none, we can go ahead and move forward to public voice, Chair. Chair Westover, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thought I lost you there for a minute.
Okay. My question is to the training contractors that are still on the line. Does it look more favorable for facilities being available for next year? Are we going to have more availability?
Dee or Tony?
Right from Temple. And as far as I know, all of the facilities that we are utilizing this year will be available next year. I'm looking for another range in the Northeast as well. To date, I have not found anything. I've gotten, Sherry, if I remember correctly, I believe you sent me some information, and I will be checking into that further.
Again, I'm going to request that whoever is in their car or their vehicle, could you please mute your mic? It is very distracting and hard to understand people that are trying to talk on the call. Thank you.
Okay. How about Tony Muha from Penn State? How's it looking for your end of the state?
Yeah, it's Tony Muha. It's looking good. We have all the facilities that we currently have available next year, and I am exploring options for some other ones. Also looking at other potential range locations as well.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, specifically, I was curious about that, you know, where we're standing with ranges and with the pandemic and all that. So, okay, that's what I have for other business. Other members of the board, do you have anything else under other business?
Chairman, this is Tricia Norwood Foden. I know I brought this up before, and I know PCCD or this particular board really we don't address it because it's not court related, but it does pertain to constables. Does anybody on the call know if there's any resource that we can share with constables regarding training on how to work the polls? You know, this is that time of the year that I get besieged with phone calls from municipalities regarding constables working the polls, and you know, with the way the elections have been going, I think the polls are becoming you know, potential areas of conflict, and I just want to make sure that constables are prepared to be able to do those duties effectively and sufficiently. And, you know, I don't know if anybody's out there that's providing training that we can pass along to our constables. I'd be really open to hearing anybody's suggestions or where I can pass along information to our voter services department and also to the constables that are tasked with working the polls.
Trish, what I would say is I don't know if any of the counties actually provide training. I know a lot of the county board of elections over the years have had a policy, that this is how constables are what their duties are, what they can and can't do. Early on, it was the issue of whether or not they have a weapon on them. I know a lot of counties now that kind of developed into county policy. So, the county board of elections, I don't know if they have any kind of association or who we could reach out to maybe raise this issue and say, we don't do any training, because it does vary county to county. But maybe staff can do a little research and see if there's anybody who would be more appropriate. I know in the past when we've reached out to the state board of elections, they have told us that's a local county issue. You got to talk to the county board of elections. So we would have to kind of find some kind of, association, lack of a better term, that deals with county board of elections. And maybe that's something we can research and get back to you.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to suggest too, John, because we did reach out to the Department of State and the Voter and Elections Bureau, and they didn't have really anything in the past. I could reach out to them again to see, I could start there and to see if there is an association for the, county election bureaus and boards, and we
Oh.
could we'll start there anyway.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, John.
Trish, just one thing I'll weigh in from my end of the state. We actually, our Board of Elections called me and said, could you have the constables come to a pre-election meeting? We'd like to talk with them and kind of give them the parameters of what we'd like to see. That was several years ago. So they have a pre-election meeting for all their judge of elections and inspector of elections. And I think if the constables in each county, recommendation to them. And I talked about this during the basic training classes. Just reach out to your board of elections and say, you're having a pre-election meeting coming up. A new constable, would it be okay for me to attend that meeting, at least, maybe meet my judge and my inspector, that's in my district, and also find out what your policies are. So we did that out this way, but, that may be something that has to happen county by county, in order to make that work.
May I say something? This is Constable Brown, Bradford County.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll move into public. I'll tell you what, before I recognize you, let's finish this up and then we'll move into public voice and then you can speak to it at that point, okay? So,
okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yep, no problem. So anything else, other business, any of the board members that want to talk about? One other point one other subject I wanted to reach out to John on, just to speak a little bit about, is our latest work groups, how that's proceeding.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and you've been participating, so I just sent out we've had 2 meetings so far, and we've actually had some good consensus because we've subdivided the group into 2 different groups, and the same issues have come up and kind of the same solutions. So my goal for the 3rd work group meeting, it would probably be the final, is to take 3 or 4 of those most important items that have come up and develop them into recommendations that would go before the board to say, here are some issues that have been around, whether it's training related or whatever, and try and make a good recommendation for the board to examine, to look at, and then maybe take action on as they see fit. And I just sent out the meeting notes, I think last week or the week before, to the group. So I'll be emailing out and trying to solicit some dates when everyone's available, and then publish an agenda to get those items into some recommendations for the board.
Okay. And also, will we be doing that in person, or are we going to continue with online the rest of the year on everything we do?
Well, I think for the work group, we could probably do it kind of like we have. We've done the hybrid. I know it's benefited the judges and their busy schedule, to be able to call in and not have to travel because they're both at either end of the state. So for the work group, I think we'll do a hybrid. And I know the agency has been working through some of the technical issues we've had there in the commission room. And initial feedback is that it's been resolved. So, staff might do some test meetings. And if so, then maybe we could go back to, the in-person, but also have a Teams meeting available for constables to call in.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see that happen if we can make that happen. The hybrid, I like the hybrid approach if we can continue to do that. So actually at this point, August meeting, we'll make a tentative that it's going to be online, but there may be a potential going to hybrid at that point, correct?
Correct. And like I said, I think staff needs to go in and test just because, we want to make sure if Sherry's computer has to be configured or, whatever to make sure it's working, or Nick's, we get that done in time. I don't want to wait to right before the meeting. So we'll have a cutoff point internally when we decide it's got to be a Teams meeting or it can be a hybrid.
Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. Anything else from the board? Okay, then we'll move on to public voice, and I want to recognize Tracy Beaver. Did you have a list of constables that called in to sign up to speak today?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first one was Abraham Smith. I know he was present earlier. Mr. Smith, are you still on the call?
Morning, Tracy, and the board. Yes, I am. Am I recognized?
Yes, I recognize you at this point. Any issues you want to bring up, feel free.
Yeah, just one question. When it comes to the training locations, has the board had any dialogue with PSP, and I know the major's present there, with utilizing the various regional training centers that they have? For example, we have a Southwest Training Center here in Greensburg, and there's 3 others throughout the state. They train other than PSP. I know they do 120. Is there been any dialogue about the availability of those to use as training facilities for constables? And I thank you.
Director Fowle, do you have any comment on that?
I know we have not. I can take that conversation offline with Major Reed in the past. Early in the program, we did, and we were not allowed to utilize those facilities. So I think we just never went back to that, but we can look into that.
Okay, great, great. All right, Tracy, who do you have next?
The second one is Thomas Haymaker out of Westmoreland County. Are you present?
Okay, hearing none.
Hearing
Move
none. Kristen Stork out of Delaware County. I don't know if she's present.
Okay.
How about Tim Kreigel out of Westmoreland County? No. And
Okay.
Chuck Kramer out of Chester County.
Okay, hearing none. Keep moving.
And the last one would be Constable Henry Morton out of Beaver County.
Okay, not hearing, then I guess Constable Brown, I believe, wanted to speak, if that's correct.
Yes, sir. Back to the elections. I served on the election board.
Go ahead and state your name and your county again, please, for the record.
Okay, Constable Herbert Brown, Bradford County.
Okay, so
I served on the elections board as inspector of elections up until I got elected constable. I can tell you what the constable needs to do is get like I want to say people per square foot area. I know where I got to go. It's I think there's like 4 people that can be allowed in. And you know who the troublemakers are, like I do anyway, just because I've already served on the board once. And just keep an eye out for those people. That's the only thing I can think of for that one. Most of the time, they're not going to give you any trouble. Some people will, some people won't.
Yeah.
I got like
Well, and
five. I know are. I got five. I know every time I see them, every election, they're gonna give me trouble. So
Well, Constable
we
Ron,
never
that's,
had a
and that is an issue across the state. You know, a lot of the constables that have worked at polls in the past, you pretty much know the flow of the poll and who's coming in, you know, and who causes your issues and that. And, you know, our biggest issue is we're trying to do things from a state perspective, you know, and unfortunately, this
sir.
county board of elections, you know, being different from county by county by county on their policies of how they want the constables to appear, how they want them to dress, whether they want a firearm that can be seen or whether they want it, you know, concealed, you know, all those different issues that come up. So that's kind of our struggle with the program to even talk about the election. I mean, we briefly touch on it in basic training, and that's the reason why it's very brief, because it's hard for us from the state level to be able to say, hey, this is what you need to do at your own polling place. And that's why my suggestion was each constable, you know, needs to reach out to their own either, you know, a board of elections or even, you know, their judge of elections for their polling place prior to the election. At least they know who they are, especially new constables coming on, and they know who they are. And that way, you show up on election day, they'll say, who's this person that just walked in?
Yep. That's something else too. They sent out a letter. I'm in constant contact with those guys. They keep me informed and whatnot. I think Monday, actually, I'm going to end up helping the judge of elections set up. We just don't have the people, and that's something else that you got to find. You got to find a lot of volunteers working the polls that have no idea. So be aware of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
very, very good. Your points are well taken, and at this point, you know, I try to limit it to 3 minutes for each, you know, for each public voice, and so I appreciate you weighing in on this subject. Do we have anybody else? Yep, you're very welcome. At this point, do we have anybody else from public voice?
Scott Davis.
Kevin Herrick, Lackawanna.
Okay, I'll recognize, would you repeat again your name and your county?
Constable Herrick out of Lackawanna County.
Okay, very good. You're recognized. Go ahead.
If there is a problem I'm a newly elected constable, and if there is a problem at the polling place, what are we expected to do?
That's,
Well,
you know,
Go ahead,
John.
Well, I was going to say that's where we were talking, every constable needs to basically probably reach out to their county board of elections, because some counties actually have a written policy about, you know, how a constable is supposed to handle situations. Some do, some don't. So I would refer you to your county board of election or voter services.
Okay. All right, I will do that. I thank you very much, and I just want to let the board know that this little session here has been very informative, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your comments. And do we have anybody else under public voice?
Scott Davis, Dauphin County.
Okay, you're recognized.
I just had 3 points. One, with the training, have we ever considered looking out or communicating with local VOTECs that are high school level? I know Dauphin County VOTEC does adult education, and they have a law enforcement program as well. Just thinking of something across the state that is already set up to provide education and law enforcement, that may be an avenue to look at. Second point, as I know I want to keep it to 3 minutes. Second point is, obviously, as I'm waiting to go through and complete my basic training, it would potentially be nice to be able to perform other trainings while I wait. But I believe every training that I've tried to sign up for, it has stated that basic training must be completed before I can sign up for anything else. So it would be nice to try to get into trainings that I could get in while I wait with the other 100 so to complete that basic training. The third point that I have is, as a judge of elections for 8 years in Dauphin County, the best advice I would give to any constable looking to serve is just walk in to a polling place, ask to speak to the judge of elections, let them know that you're the local constable, and if they have any issues, here's your cell phone number. Most polling places that I'm aware of across the Commonwealth in the 8 years that I've been doing it and training during it don't have issues, but sometimes it's just having someone that's, they're present as a constable. So if an issue does arise, they know who to call. That would be my only piece of that, but definitely reach out to your local judges. If you're not sure who they are, show up on election day, introduce yourself, sign in on the book, and or reach out to the county office prior. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, and the board will take that into consideration, especially the VOTEC recommendation. We'll, our training contractors are on the line, so that'll just give them another idea, because they're always looking for ideas of places to contact, because oftentimes, nobody is, reaching out to us. We have to reach out to them in order to find locations, for training. So point very well taken. Do I have anybody else for public voice?
Constable Michael Ludwig, Montgomery County.
Okay, Michael Ludwig, you are recognized.
Just a quick question for the constables who are currently enrolled but have not completed an 80-hour course. Are they able to enroll in a firearms course that follows that, or do they have to wait for their certification and then quickly go in and sign up for the firearms course? Thanks.
You must
Director
obtain
Fowler,
your.
you want to comment, or Sherry?
Yeah, I'll comment. This is Sherry. You must obtain your base certification before you're eligible to enroll in the basic firearms or any firearms class. So even if you have your base certification, you go get your base firearms certification, you would still need to keep in that same cycle to recertify each year then. But you cannot go to the firearms until you have that base certification.
Thank you, Sherry. Michael, thank you for your comment, and we'll do our best to make sure these things happen. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Any other public voice? Okay, hearing none, then. Yes, go ahead.
Yes,
Go
this
ahead.
is new Constable John Emmerich in Somerset County. I
Okay,
also have a
recognized.
question about. Am I recognized?
Yes, you're recognized. Go ahead, sir.
I also have a question about the election coverage. Does it make a difference for what action you should or could take if you're certified versus uncertified?
And that's once again your local county. But John, go ahead and weigh in on that.
Right. So there is no requirement for you to be certified to be at your polling place. That's the only mandated requirement for a constable to be at their polling place on election day. That's the only statutory obligation you have. So, and because of the variety of how counties handle constables and election places, polling places, we don't train on it, and there's no requirement to be certified to be at your polling place.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone further for public voice?
Question?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, new Constable Joe McElhinney from Westmoreland County. Would I be correct in our case that a lot of the warrants, transports, et cetera, have been given to the Sheriff's Department? Would I be correct in assuming that when that happens, PCCD sees no fee from those events whatsoever?
Correct. So if the sheriff serves that paper, there is a surcharge that is charged, but that goes to the deputy sheriff training fund.
Okay, I would only then reiterate a point that was made earlier. It would be great if the courts could request that the magistrates use constables when they are available.
Okay, very good. Very good. Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that. And yeah, we do try to recognize what counties are participating as far as the revenue, because that's our biggest concern. Having revenue coming in order to fund the training. So we try to stay on top of it with each county, and making sure they're aware that the services are available. But as you've heard, like Chester, they have issues with shortages, and other counties like up in the Northwest here, there's shortages from place to place. So it is kind of inequitable across the system, and I do appreciate your comment. Do we have anybody else under public voice?
Andres Salazar, new elected constable from Hanover Penn Township, York County.
Okay, recognized.
After the 80 hours basic training, how long do we have to wait to take the firearm training?
You-
Is there a time?
The basic firearms, it's 40 hours.
Okay, we take it after we're done with the basic training, or do we have to wait a certain amount of time until we take it?
Right, no. So what happens is you complete the basic training, you have to get your liability insurance and file it with the clerk of courts of your county. Once we receive that, we can certify you, and then you're eligible to enroll in the basic training, or the basic firearms.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else under public voice? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to adjournment. I would like to inquire at this point, is there anybody joined a meeting who was not previously noted for attendance purposes? Okay, hearing none, then I'll request a motion
yes,
to
sir.
adjourn the meeting. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Scott Warren, Constable, Montgomery County. I just joined in first thing this morning. I didn't pre-register.
Okay, thank you so much. And okay, at this point, we'll move on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion. Tricia Norwood Foden.
Okay, Trish, your motion is recognized. Do I have a second?
Joanne Reed, second.
I'll make a second.
Okay. Major Reed, I'll recognize you as a second then. At this point, Ms. Leffler, will you do a roll call vote?
Chair Westover,
Aye.
Constable Pites,
Aye.
Tricia Norwood Foden,
Aye.
and Major Reed.
Aye.
Okay,
All
thank
in
you so
favor?
much. Any nays or any abstentions? Very good. Motion is approved. I'll adjourn this meeting. I thank everybody for their participation, and we will meet again in August. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
everyone.
Thank you very much for Lackawanna County.
Thank you very much for Bradford County.
Thank you.